So yesterday, this version, The Bible and the Making of Modern India, was released in the CSI auditorium by the Member of Parliament, Hol Thiruvalam. Vallavam. Sorry. Yes. So he summarized it apparently quite well. He spoke in Tamil, but others told me that he did a good job. So before this, I had written 3 books on Indian history. One of them, I don't know if it is here, is called The Father of Modern India, William Carey, which is saying that Mahatma Gandhi is not the father of modern India. Raja Ram Mohan Roy is not the father of modern India. William Carey is the father of what we now call India. The second book was a response to Arun Shourie. Arun Shourie, a member of parliament, at that time, he, before BJP came to power for the first time, and he became a minister under Vajpayee ji. So he wrote an attack on Christian missions. The Roman Catholic bishops invited him to Pune to give a lecture on how a Hindu sees Christian missions. The bishops were hoping that he will praise Christian missions because his entire family is educated by Christian colleges, universities, schools. But he condemned missions as a conspiracy of British imperialism, that England had colonized India politically, militarily. Missionaries were brought in to colonize the Indian mind. Missions are the worst form of colonialism because they harvest our souls, they enslave our minds. And that's what the missions were doing. So the Lord asked me to begin to respond to him, and I protested because I was working with illiterate people in the village. We have so many PhDs in missiology, church history, etc. They should respond. But nobody was responding to him, so the Lord said, no, you respond, because you have done some study in William Carey, how the missionary movement started in India and what it did. You also have a personal relationship, because I was writing, he was publishing in some of my stuff in Indian Express. I had baptized his nephew, who is still leading the work that Ruth and I started in Madhya Pradesh. And so the Lord kept insisting that you respond. So those responses, each letter, I was writing to him as an individual, specific letters, answering his points. And that became a book called Missionary Conspiracy, Letters to a Postmodern Hindu. My argument was simple, that yes, missions were a conspiracy, but they were not colonial conspiracy, they were divine conspiracy, because it is God's agenda to bless India. So one of the arguments I made in that book, which was published in India and also in England, one of my arguments was that it was not Mahatma Gandhi, but the Bible that set India free. So some of you may know Professor Prabhu Guptara. He said to me, I think before the book was published, he may have been reading manuscript. He said that you must delete this, because we understand what you're saying. Nobody else does, and no one else will believe you that the Bible set India free, not Mahatma Gandhi. So I said, no, that's a very important point that I'm making in this book, and this has to be there. So he said, in that case, you have to defend it. So I said, okay, I will defend my statement that it is the Bible, not Gandhi, that set India free. So Prabhu Guptara and Ram Gidumal, you may have heard his name, a Sindhi businessman in London, 2 of them gave me a scholarship. That was the first time I was able to write a book in daytime. Normally his day was for work, writing was for night, hobby, side job, from which I didn't expect any money. So I was able to write India the Grand Experiment, which was argument that modern India was a grand experiment envisioned by British evangelicals and implemented by them in creating, transforming the Mughal Empire into modern India. This was a grand experiment. As you remember, that William Carey's motto was, expect great things from God, attempt great things for God, because his outlook was very different than today's evangelical outlook. He believed that future can be greater, future can be better. India can be reformed, transformed, just as the gospel has reformed Europe. So that mindset continued until about the 1920s and 30s, and for over 120 years, the modern India was created. So those three books, and then I got into serving the rural poor, etc., a study of Hindu gurus and the truth and transformation. And as a result of my study of Hindu gurus and the book, which was an instant bestseller, because Asia's largest publishing house, which was at that time the Vikas Publishing House, they published it as a Hindu publishing house, publishing my study of Hindu gurus, which climaxes in my argument that Jesus is the true guru, is my guru. Because Vikas published it, Sunday Magazine, which was at that time India's largest weekly, India Today had been born, but it was fortnightly, and they were publishing only 5,000 copies every 2 weeks. So Sunday was the largest weekly, like the Time Magazine of India. They decided to serialize the world of gurus. For 8 to 9 weeks, they took a chapter. It has 13 chapters, but I think they took 8 or 9 chapters and summarized it and published it. So to have in India's largest magazine for 8 or 9 weeks, a chapter published, that is what launched the book, and that even Sirampur accepted it as a textbook, but it became a textbook in the University of Cambridge for study of contemporary Hinduism, the Guru movement. Because of that, a publisher asked me to write a book on the New Age movement, and that's the only one of my books which has not been published in India, but some chapters from it, such as on astrology, have been developed into booklets and published here. But the whole book has not yet been published. So from that, I got into the issues of social reform, and many other books began to follow. But there was a lot of pressure a few years ago that India the Grand Experiment, Missionary Conspiracy should be republished. So I began revising India the Grand Experiment, but never finished revisions. So Andrew Jerome here in Chennai, he said in end of November, beginning of December, that when I become 75 years old, they should publish my book on the Bible and India. So that is what this book became, the Bible in the Making of Modern India. So this is taking a lot of the material from the previous books, but adding to it some of the content, like Dr. Marcia here. She has a very powerful chapter on Kanyakumari. Kanyakumari was never part of the British Empire. It was under a Hindu kingdom, Travancore, under Travancore, before independence. It was part of what is now Kerala. And today, Kanyakumari, in terms of percentage, has more Christians than any other state in India, any other district in India. That's leaving the northeast aside. But on the mainland of India, Kanyakumari is most Christian district. How did that happen? What did the gospel do to Kanyakumari? So her chapter is very powerful and much more detailed. I've taken some of the material. Then we had here somewhere near Coimbatore, a physics researcher. He helped write an article on India's Green Revolution, how the Bible transformed Indian agriculture. So his chapter will also be published in the next volume. I've taken some parts of it and they are here in this book. And there is another person, his parents are in Chandigarh, but he studied in St. Stephen's College in Delhi. Samuel Davidson and his wife Ishita, while they were still studying in St. Stephen's or Delhi University, I asked them if they would help research how the Bible, the evangelical movement, created India's civil services. So his chapter is much longer, but a summary section of it is here in my book, with his permission. So this book is a result of several of my previous books and some of the research which other people have done, which I have plagiarized with their permission, and put it as an appetizer. But it will be followed by at least 3 more volumes, which 30 or 40 of us have been working on, and you're welcome to join us once a week. It used to be Thursday night. We'll probably change it to Friday night, 9 p.m. India time, where we meet on Zoom and look at different papers that others have been researching on different aspects of India. And we still need some researchers in case any of you feel like writing, the movers and seekers. We need a chapter on Indian military, that how the professional army of India is a creation of the evangelical movement, etc. So many more chapters are yet to be written, but I think we are ready to start publishing one book every 3 to 6 months in this series of how the Bible created modern India. Because for 75 years, under the Congress rule, government-funded universities and historians were deceiving us of the role of the Congress party in creating modern India, of Gandhi, Nehru, Patel. And then in the new dispensation, the BJP has been promoting its mythology of how Savarkar, Subhash Chandra Bose, etc., created modern India in order to undermine Gandhi and Congress. They are right that Congress had exaggerated and built a mythology around Mahatma Gandhi, but they are wrong that Hindutva created modern India. Savarkar, who was the president of Hindu Mahasabha, who is the father of Hindutva, he was very clear that there is nothing Indian in Indian constitution. All the ideas, the idea of India is alien to India, including the name. You know that in September 2023, the BJP was trying to change the name India to Bharat. And then in 24, they fought the election to try and win 400 seats in parliament in order to change the constitution. But unfortunately for them, the constitution has become the sacred cow for the Ambedkarites, Dalits and Bahujan, OBC. Constitution is the sacred cow, and slaughtering cow is immoral. It's not allowed by the lower caste. And that's why they lost so many seats in the last election, that they could not even get simple majority. They have to run the government with the help of Naidu and Nitish Kumar, Bihar and Andhra, Telangana. So the problem is that during this period, the world, secular universities, Congress universities, Hindu universities, have been able to deceive the nation because they understand that whoever controls history controls the future. The church, misled by the changes in American theology, lost interest in history. Indians never wrote history. The word itihas, I don't know if in Tamil you use the word itihas. Itihas meant epics such as Ramayana and Mahabharata, which have nothing to do with history. They're myths. That is what was called itihas. The meaning of the word itihas, history or search for quest, the quest for truth. This was only when English education came, Christian education came into India, then the meaning of the word itihas changed because we had no word for history. The very first history of India was written by James Stuart Mill. James Stuart Mill, was it John Stuart Mill? One is father, the other is son. I forget which one wrote the history of British India. That was the first time someone wrote a history of India. Now, Mill never came to India, but he served as the Secretary for India to British Parliament. And in that capacity, all the reports from India, from collectors, police, intelligence, etc., were going to the British Crown through him, and he had to read everything and get copies made for appropriate authorities that should know about Indian economics or military or wars, etc. So he gathered information about India, particularly about the British period in India, and wrote the first book. And in that book, he was very critical of India, dismissed India. You know, it's easy to hate him today, but just as I had a little break this afternoon up here, I was listening to a YouTube video on James Prinsep. Until 1837, no one in India had heard of a king called Ashoka. No one in India, no Pandit, no learned scholar, was able to read anything on the Ashoka's pillars. We never knew anything about Ashoka. And this is what a Hindi video on YouTube is saying, that James Prinsep, whose father was a member of parliament, he became in charge of the currency press, particularly coins. So he was the one who spent years trying to know what script is written on these Ashoka pillars and stupas and what they mean. And he discovered about Ashoka, there were things written in Buddhist and Jain scriptures about Ashoka, but until that point, those who were reading, and there was no Buddhism here in 1837, but those who were reading these Buddhist scriptures, they all thought that this is description of some mythical king. But it was his ability to read Brahmi, Prakrit, and another script on which these Pali was the language, not the script. Script was called something else. So there was not one scholar in India of any religion who could read any of these Ashoka pillars. But he deciphered the scripts, and that's how we got to know our history. So it was this intellectual bankruptcy of India at that time in the 19th century. But earlier we had had great kings and great ideas. This began to be discovered by the British. And Mill writes the first book on Indian history. A graduate of Calcutta University, he responds to this historical attack on India with a book which he titled A History of India as Revealed to Me in a Dream. That was the title of his book on history. His own colleagues, his fellow students, graduates of Allahabad in Calcutta University, they began mocking him that you can't write history that is revealed to you in a dream. You have to research. You have to investigate truth, because history is not mythology that you can dream up. So then the process of history writing began in India about 1870, 1880s, 1890s. And when honest historians, Indian historians, began to critically look at Indian history and admit the weaknesses of our nation, by the time Mahatma Gandhi came here in 1914, 15, 16, whatever time frame, and he read these Indian historians criticizing India, he said that we have to get rid of this habit, British habit of writing history. We have to get rid of this British habit of writing history. So this is a terrible thing that you are telling truth about our own ancestors. We must talk mythology. So his concept of Ram Rajya was pirated, plagiarized from the New Testament, the kingdom of God, but rooted in mythology. So Ram Rajya was mythologizing Christ's concept of the kingdom of God coming into this world. So Indian attitude to history, that there is no distinction between history and mythology, truth and stories. There is no final distinction. That is what is now being popularized by the BJP, because Hinduism had always believed that history is mythology. Mythology is history. But in the book I'm mentioning that BJP has legitimate reasons to hate the name India, because India is not an Indian word. There never was an India. Christopher Columbus starts from Spain to find the sea route to India, and he goes west to come to India because he knew that the earth is round if he keeps going west. But he got stuck in America, and he thought the people in America are the Indians. Even after everybody found out that that was not India, the name Indian American has stuck, because there was no geographic entity called India. 3-4 years later, 1497 I think, Vasco da Gama landed in Calicut, only to discover that no one in Calicut calls himself an Indian, has a concept of India. They don't even call themselves Malayalis, because Malayalam didn't exist. All over Kerala, there were a number of dialects. Most of them derived from ancient Tamil, but there was no Malayalam. Malayalam is creation of Bible translators. There was an ancient Tamil, but modern Tamil is creation of Bible translators. If you go on the Marina Beach Drive, there are 6 statues of the creators of modern Tamil. 3 of them are missionaries. Only one is a Brahmin who had publicly denied Brahmanism. So Brahmins were the learned class. They had no interest in any of the Indian languages. Right now, the central government, at least the Tamilians, fear that the central government is trying to impose Hindi on southern states, on Tamil Nadu. And an impression has been created that Hindi is a Hindu language. But in fact, Hindi is creation of Bible translators. And the Pandits, Brahmins, hated Hindi. It's a biblical language. The first person who created Hindustani was Dr. Gilchrist. He was a surgeon, Scottish surgeon in East India Company Army. He was told that the national language of India, which meant the court language of Mughal Empire, is Persian. There is Arabic, the language of the madrasa, where children are learning, not learning but memorizing Quran in Arabic. And there is Sanskrit, a sophisticated, developed language, but reserved only for those who are preparing to become priests. Sanskrit couldn't become the national language of any part of India, not even of a single district, because it could never become the mother tongue of Brahmin boys and girls. The reason, there are only about 25,000 people in the world today who can speak Sanskrit. But Sanskrit is not the mother tongue of Hindu boys and girls, because the learned Brahmins who knew Sanskrit never taught it to their wives. If the mothers don't know Sanskrit, how can Sanskrit become the mother tongue of Brahmins? So as Gilchrist traveled with the East India Company soldiers from Calcutta all the way to Faizabad, which was the capital of Awadh at that point, later it moved to Lucknow, he found that nobody knows Persian. Not even the local officers, not the British officers who are posted all along the way. No one speaks Persian. So what is India's language? Every 10 miles, there were no kilometers back then, every 10 miles the language changes a dialect. So he took many of these dialects, he was taking notes all through his journey, and created Hindustani. But there was no printing at that point, and there was no school system at that point anywhere in India where Hindustani was being taught. So nobody actually learned Hindustani except the Englishmen who were trying to make sense of these dialects and communicate, and some Indians who were working for the East India Company. Out of that Hindustani, Henry Martyn, who was working in Kanpur, he created modern Urdu through translating the Bible into Urdu. Well, can you go out and speak? Selvi, can you go out and take the phone call, please? Yeah. Or you can switch it off. So Urdu was created 50, 60 years before Hindi. So Urdu became the state language of throughout North India, including Punjab and Pakistan now. Then some Hindus were beginning to feel and beginning to say that we need a language which is leaning not towards Persian and Arabic and Pashto, but towards Sanskrit and Indian languages. Therefore, modern Hindi was created by people like Reverend Samuel Kellogg. 6 months a year he was in Allahabad, 6 months he was in Mussoorie, and there is a church in Mussoorie called Kellogg Memorial Church because he fell off the bicycle into the ditch and died there. And that's still a language school in that Kellogg church. The first Hindi writer is not a Brahmin, is Bhartendu Harishchand. He was 11 years younger than Kellogg, and he began writing in Hindi. And he was the one who championed that you can't have a nation unless people have a mother tongue developed. I'll come back to that theme in a few minutes. But all of the Indian languages, including modern Tamil, distinct from ancient Tamil, are creation of Bible translators. Because the Protestant Reformation was many things. It was a linguistic revolution. When Martin Luther understood the New Testament doctrine of priesthood and kingship of all believers. If every believer is to be priest and king, he can't serve God unless he knows God. You have to be able to read God's word to know God. You can't do God's will on earth if you don't know God's will. So the Bible should not be in Latin. Bible should be in German, English. So Tyndale comes from England to Wittenberg to start translating the Bible. So Protestant Reformation, because it was trying to lift up everyone to become a priest and king, serving their father, or their father's kingdom, it required a linguistic revolution and education revolution. This is what I call the second education revolution, which begins in 1520 in Germany, and we are all products of that education revolution, which has now been corrupted. So even what is called Christian school or Christian college is not really Christian, except it's being managed perhaps by a Christian board. But that is true in the West, this is true in India. And you don't need bombs and militia to destroy a nation. You can destroy a nation by deceiving a nation, by teaching falsehood, teaching immorality, so that if our best of our graduates are corrupt, running a corrupt government, and this is not my statement, this is Walsan Thampu's statement. He was the principal of St. Stephen's College during Manmohan Singh's regime. And when Anna Hazare's Kejriwal agitation against corruption in government, central government, was at its peak, Walsan Thampu made a press statement that if these allegations are true, And if Manmohan Singh government, central government, is as corrupt as they say it is, then the blame for it rests on my college, St. Stephen's College, because half of the central secretariat or the, the cabinet, half of the cabinet and senior bureaucrats are graduates of St. Stephen's. So the corruption, the source of corruption in India is Christian education, which has been secularized and corrupted. Of course, Thampu got into a lot of trouble for saying that, but there was substance of truth in what he was saying. So the moral corruption, economic corruption, bribery, etc., is intellectual corruption and slavery to devil, slavery, fear of death. I'll come back to that in a few minutes. But I was starting to say that they want to change the name India because why is Columbus or Vasco da Gama looking for India? Well, because the Latin Bible in the book of Esther described India as the last province of the Persian Empire. When Esther is the queen, Persian Empire has come up to India. That was the land around the Sindh River. The Persians couldn't pronounce S, Sindh, so they called it Hind. But when Persians began interacting with Greece, Greeks called it Ind, Indike. So Latin Bible, in Esther 1 and Esther 8, the word India occurs as the last province of the Persian Empire. It created an impression that when you have gone to India, you have gone to the end of the world. That's why 300 years after Columbus, when the James Cook and others discovered Australia, native Australians were called Indians. These days they don't like being called Indians. Everybody stopped calling it Indians, but 100 years ago, Australians were Indians. Now in year 1600, East India Company was formed, British East India Company. In 1602, Dutch East India Company was formed. They wanted to trade with India, but they were not thinking of Mughal Empire as India. Mughal Empire was Hindustan. They were thinking of Indonesia, Indian Asia, because there was no geographic entity called India. There never had been, except that Sindh, land around Sindh, was misspelled or mispronounced as Ind, and the people living around Sindh were called Hindus. So BJP is right that India is an alien name, biblical name. The problem is that there never was a nation called Bharat. Bharat ruled in Ayodhya for 14 years. Ayodhya was a tiny kingdom. That's why Ram had to start Ashwamedh Yagya when he returned from, after beating Dravidians or Sri Lankans. When he returned to Ayodhya, he started the Ashwamedh Yagya to extend the borders of Ayodhya. So Bharat never ruled a kingdom called India or Bharat. So there never was Bharat. This is why Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, when he is writing Discovery of India, he wrestles with this question, what should we name? And he chooses the name India, not Bharat. And this issue is debated in the Constituent Assembly. What shall we call this land? And they settled on India, that is Bharat. The issue, why don't call it Bharat, that is India? This was debated, and the majority ruled against calling it Bharat, that is India. They chose the name India, that is Bharat. The whole idea of geographic nation, is geography important? India never had the concept of geography. So I began by saying India never had a concept of history. There never was a nation called India. There never was a concept of a geographic entity. Uh, so none of the Vedas, none of the Puranas, Upanishads, the Ramayana, Mahabharata, none of them describe the geography of India. The first time Indian geography is described by an Indian is Rabindranath Tagore's 1911 song, Jana Gana Man Adhinayak Jai Hai. That's the first time an Indian poet defines what is India as Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat, Maratha, Dravida, Utkal, Bank, Vindhya, Himachal, Yamuna, Ganga, etc. Now, if you notice, this is our national anthem. Our national anthem leaves Kashmir out. Because in Tagore's time, Tagore's geography of India comes from the Stamp Act that the British Parliament passed in 1899. 1899, a Stamp Act was passed, and it intentionally excluded Kashmir because the British had won Kashmir from a Sikh ruler. They couldn't manage Kashmir from Calcutta. There were no bridges, no trains, no ships. So they sold Kashmir to the governor of Jammu, who had made a lot of money. So he paid the money. He became the ruler of Jammu and Kashmir. So in the Stamp Act of India, Jammu and Kashmir was not part of India. So that Stamp Act defined the geography which Tagore took. Now the first scientific institution in India ever established was Survey of India. To survey India, to make maps of India. No Hindu ruler, no Muslim ruler had ever created any scientific institution, certainly not an institution studying the geography of India. Survey of India was the first scientific institution, something like 1769. The date may be wrong by a few years here and there. And that continues till today. This whole idea that geography is important came from Genesis. God is saying to Abraham that I will make you a nation, a great nation, and this will be your territory. These will be your borders. And the border is explained of Israel many times, particularly when you come to Joshua after chapter 14 of Joshua. You have detailed geography, boundaries of each of the tribes. So geography is important, borders are important, and that's the idea that Paul introduces to Europe in Acts 17, 26 and 27. Paul says in Athens to the Greeks that God, from one man, created all the nations. He set their times, their histories, and their boundaries. Greece has no word for nation. That's why ethne and ethnos does mean people group. Because Greek language, Greece was city-states and tribes. Alexander organized these city-states and tribes into an empire. So Greek was city-states and tribes, never a nation, which became an empire. And the only political system that Greece ever exported was imperialism. American universities in 1910s began to deceive the whole world that democracy and freedom and nation came from Greece. No, Paul brought the Jewish idea. So you still have many foolish missiologists who would say, oh, modern's idea of nation, like India becoming a nation, is a secular idea. It's modern, yes, but it is an ancient idea that begins in Genesis 10, 11, 12, the concept of nation. Europe accepted it only in 1648, after 30 years' war, in the Peace of Westphalia. Holland, the Netherlands, and Switzerland became the first two modern nations. But the idea of nation is not modern, it's ancient. It's Jewish idea. USA became the third nation. 13 colonies fought against British imperialism, and they didn't become an empire. They became a nation. We will not have a king because Jesus is king. We will have a president, which means one who presides amongst equals. Individually, he has more power, but collectively they can impeach him. He has power to do good, He has no power to do evil. So president means one who presides amongst equals. Uh, he has executive powers, but he's not a king, he's not an emperor. We are a nation. Empire is Luciferian idea. In Isaiah 14, we've all heard that this is a description of Satan falling, which is Milton's Paradise Lost. But if you read Isaiah 14 itself, Lucifer is a name given to Babylon, to empire, to imperialism. This is a diabolical idea, which a French sociologist, Jacques Ellul, he has a book called The Meaning of the City, in which he explains that city is an exploitative idea. A lot of people living together can't grow their own food, they can't grow their own milk. They have to loot the villages, the countryside which is producing. So every institution in the city is sucking off the wealth from the countryside. That's why village means poverty in India. City means relative affluence. So people in Babel are building an imperial city. Rome is a city which becomes an empire. So many of the empires are really cities that have enough young men who can go out, fight wars, take over other people's land, collect revenues. So city is an exploitative imperial idea. God destroys the Babel, one city, to create nations. Nations is God's prescription for peace. Empire is a diabolical idea for war. Nation, God creates nations. The essence of nation is not ethnicity. This is a foolishness that has come from America, particularly from Fuller Seminary, permeated every seminary in America, that ethne or ethnos refers to ethnicity. So nations means people groups, nations means ethnic groups. No, all the people living in Babel in Genesis chapter 11 are descendants of Noah. 3 sons, 3 daughter-in-laws, they multiply, they become many people. This is one ethnic group speaking one language, divided into many nations by confusion of language. Language is the basis of nation. If no seminary in Chennai is telling this, this is because American seminaries have confused your professors. Language is the basis of a nation. This is why when India was reorganized as linguistic provinces, Tamil Nadu is distinct from Kerala or Karnataka or Andhra at that point, or Maharashtra or Odisha, because you're speaking different language. But you're a great nation, many ethnicities, many languages living together and in one geography and one governing structure. Most people reading the Bible don't see that Israel was never one people group. Israel was 13 tribes because Joseph had become 2 tribes. 13 tribes living together in one territory, governing themselves. That's a nation, a great nation, because there are 13 tribes. When tribalism takes over, Israel splits into northern tribes of Israel, southern tribes called Judah. They're all descendants of Jacob, not all descendants of Abraham, because Abraham had Ishmael and Isaac had Esau. Their children, Abraham, not all of Abraham's children are part of Israel. They're all Jacob's children. But they're trying to be one nation. When tribalism or people groupism takes over, that one nation is divided between 2 nations. Right? Why are the 2 nations? Because nation has nothing to do with ethnicity. There are 2 territories, 2 governing structures. Therefore, Israel and Judah are 2 nations. Now, why did American missiology begin to mislead the whole world that disciple all nations mean reach all unreached people groups? That's a different subject that you can take up during Q&A. But my point is that the Roman Catholics brought the idea of geography to India. So Columbus, Vasco da Gama, these are Roman Catholics. But the idea of a nation state, geographic nation state, came to India with the Protestant movement, with the Bible translators. So East India Company has come here to make money, to trade. They wanted to do it in Indonesia, but the Dutch beat them up, so they settled for India as the primary trading center. They were not here as friends of India, to make India a great nation. That was the missionary movement, to make India a great nation. And making India a great nation involved, first of all, to attack the caste system and educate the downtrodden, oppressed. Because India was weakened, among many things, by caste system. If 80-85% of the population are not allowed to read and write, you are not developing the potential of India. The true wealth of a nation is not in petroleum or gold or silver or diamond. True wealth of the nation is wisdom. That's why the book of Proverbs keeps saying, seek wisdom. It's better than gold, better than silver, better than diamonds and rubies. You must seek wisdom. That's why the missionary movement, to unleash the potential. So in the Middle East, everybody knew that there's petroleum, a useless stuff, until the mind is developed to drill petroleum, refine it, make it useful for all sorts of things, from creating light and electricity and heat to running vehicles and flying aeroplanes. It's the human wisdom, intelligence, creativity, which is necessary to turn a nation into a great nation. So to turn a nation into a great nation, first thing God does is give 10 commandments. So here are a bunch of slaves, they have come out. I want to make you a great nation. And the idea of great nation does include economic development, that you will be a nation flowing with milk and honey. Economic abundance is part of God's plan. But it's not going to come through 5-year economic plans. It's going to come through when you begin to obey God's law. This is what Abraham is told in Genesis 18, that Abraham will surely become a great nation because he will instruct, he will teach, he will guide his children and his household, his ethne and his non-ethne, those who are part of his economic life. And he had a very big group. 317 men went with him to rescue Lot. So their wives, and maybe 100 or a few hundred people stayed back to protect the animals and women and children. So he was already a very wealthy man, not just in terms of animals, but in terms of the manpower who were part of his family. Abraham will become a great nation because he will teach his children and his household to walk in my ways, to do what is just, what is right. Obeying God will turn a nation into a great nation. This is what Paul is saying in Acts 17, that God created out of one man all the nations. He set their borders and their time, so history and geography, so that they might seek him, although he is not far from any of us. So nations are God's creation, and they are created to seek God. We, the evangelists, think of in individualistic term, because individualism came out of the Bible. It was a great discovery of Protestant movement, when Luther says, my conscience is captive to the word of God, therefore I cannot obey the emperor or popes or bishops. That's individualism. But the biblical individualism was opposite of what secularized individualism has become, where the whole universe exists for me, God exists for me, the church is for me. If I'm not satisfied, I move to another church. Marriage is for me. If I don't like this spouse, I divorce. The babies are for me. If I find this pregnancy inconvenient, I abort this baby. I'm the center of my universe. But biblical individualism was, not my will, but thine be done. Take my body. I surrender it to you. I sacrifice it. You break my body. shed my blood for the salvation of others. That's what was reflected in the missionary movement of people coming here, laying down their lives to bless India, to bring light to India, to make India a great nation. So, God creates nation. Now, Paul is quoting Deuteronomy 32:8, which we don't need to look at. So, Protestant Christianity, the Bible brings the concept of nation. The Mughals, new empire. Hindus, new empire. Buddhists, new empires, such as Ashoka's empire. There was never a concept of nation, and never a concept of Bharat as a nation or India as a nation. These are created by the Bible. So, East India Company has come here to make money. William Carey has come as a friend of India. That was his paper, which merged into Calcutta Statesman. And every Sunday, Calcutta Statesman carries a statement that this paper incorporates friend of India. India should be a great nation. This is God's vision. Again, because of the Holocaust, because Europe ill-treated Jews in the first half of the 20th century, there is a guilt reaction in the European church, which is going overboard in favor of Israel, that God cares only for Israel as a nation. But Abraham is chosen to bless all the nations. God has created all the nations. They are walking in darkness. Abraham gets to know God and gets to know God's will. He is becoming a light to the nations to make all the nations great. That's what God is doing in India, beginning with translation of God's word into Indian languages, then teaching Indians to read and write their own language, their mother tongue, to develop their mind and morality. You shall not covet. Does God want us to be a land flowing with milk and honey? How can we become a land of economic abundance without coveting? You shall not covet means you shall create. Yes, I'm giving you land, I'm giving you seed. You have to multiply it 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. That's true spirituality. You're given 5 talents, turn it into 10 talents. That's true spirituality. So the concept of economic development, that everyone who has talents must learn to multiply. So the good servant probably turns 5 talents into 20. He uses 10 for his needs, brings 10, lays it down at the master's feet. You gave me 5, I'm returning 10. Thank you. So this whole idea of everyone developing his or her own potential for economic development. In this book, I focused on agriculture. On other books, we will focus on industrialization, etc. But there were many famines. Every year, one part or the other of India was struggling with famines. Why didn't any learned intellectual in India produce a kind of variety of wheat or rice or dal, which could be grown in hot season, which has short duration, which is heat resistant? An American agronomist, Norman Borlaug, has to come to win the Nobel Prize for Green Revolution, because Indians who were cultivating their mind, they did not work with their hands. Those who were working with their hands, they were not allowed to cultivate their minds. So Hinduism was the factor which forcefully kept India in poverty. These are things that are discussed in the book, but I should move towards a conclusion. That did colonialism loot India? Yes, it did. Lord Macaulay, Thomas Babington Macaulay, he was Britain's greatest historian of the 19th century. came to India and he wrote about British rule in India. And he said that when the British rule began, which is 1765 or so, the Battle of Plassey in 1757, but after the Battle of Buxar, the Mughal emperor gives to East India Company the administrative authority, or the Diwani, the right to collect taxes in Bengal. These young boys who have come from Britain to make money in India, nobody has taught them how to govern. They are riffraff of British society who have nothing to lose by leaving England, much to gain if they can survive the climate, the dust, the malarias and diarrheas, etc. here in India. Suddenly, as they become tax collectors, they have the authority to govern. And we Indians are experts in bribing. So their character, these were riffraff of British society. They begin to loot India. And Macaulay says that the British rule in India was, British East India Company was a gang of public robbers, just as our government today and our police and our civil services have become a gang of public robbers. That's what East India Company was. He says it was not despotism of a Gentile, pagan, barbarian tyrant. It was much worse. It was the rule of an evil genie. British rule was demonic. But it was the evangelical movement that transformed the British rule in order to bless India, to give India one of the world's best governing structure. William Carey, everybody knows he was a missionary. He started Srirampur Mission. 3 days a week, he was in Calcutta training civil servants. The Bibles that were being printed in Srirampur, they were translated in Fort William College by their pundits. Initially, the Fort William College and the East India Company was paying for those translations. Later, when the directors objected, British and Foreign Bible Society was created. It was still the pundits teaching in Fort William College, but they were, for translation, they were being paid by the Bible Society. Srirampur was publishing those Bibles, but it was for the sake of civil servants that the Bibles were being translated, so that if they're coming to Tamil land or Telugu land or Kerala land, Malayalam land, they might learn the languages by reading the Bible. They might also learn how God's will is to be done in governing India. That's where the Bible translation, Bible study movement was being built up in India. The Bible was creating India's civil services. All the teachers of civil services were reverends. We don't know this. That is because evangelicalism changed. Civil services were created, they were born in German Reformation, moved to Britain, came from Britain from here, that if we love our neighbors as ourselves, we must give to India as good a government as we want for ourselves. And the evangelical movement succeeded in it. In 1947, when India became independent, few months before independence, 15th August is independence, in April actually, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who became our first deputy prime minister and home minister, he said to the ICS, Indian Civil Services, that Indian civil services is the steel frame of India. It's the skeleton, which gives just, fair, trustworthy governance to India. So from about 1820 to 1960, India had clean, trustworthy police, collectors, judicial system, and this was creation of the Bible and creation of evangelical movement. It was Claudius Buchanan, who was the provost of Fort William College. His wife used to be sick often, so they had to go back to England. He would travel around to churches and universities to challenge churches in Britain that God has given India to us, Asia to us. At that time, the concept of India is not clearly applied to India, but South Asia. God has given South Asia to us. Now we need to send good young men, women were not coming, good young men to govern India, not the riffraff of British society. So the people who came to govern India after 1810 or so, vast majority of them were sons of poor pastors in Britain. First son will stay at home, second or third son will be sent to India. He will go through Haileybury College outside of London as a young boy, then he'll come to Fort William College. And the evangelical movement was creating British civil service in India, then later British army in India, the professional army, to give the strong, just, fair administrative structure. And a management guru, Peter Drucker, has a long paragraph on it, several pages on it, explaining who were these young people that were building modern India. They're the ones who began to write constitution for India. The 1935 India Act was written by British civil servants, and that's the foundation of the constitution that Ambedkar finally drafted. But the Peter Drucker, the management guru, is summarizing two-volume work, Men Who Ruled India by Philip Mason, Men Who Ruled India. Now, he discusses who were these young people that built modern India. Clean, trustworthy, reliable, honest government to India. So Christianity created modern India, the Bible, not Christianity itself, but the Bible particularly, the evangelical movement, created modern India. And I make the point that the early leaders of modern India, Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Patel, Gulzari Lal Nanda, Morarji Desai, Lal Bahadur Shastri, none of them were ever accused of bribery and corruption. There were many criticisms that were leveled against them, and some of those criticisms are correct. But corruption was not part of Indian politics or administration. That came only in the 1970s. 73 was when the students in Ahmedabad began protesting against corruption in the university, mess, hostels, and Jayaprakash Narayan took it up as call for a total revolution, changing India's corrupt government. And then Anna Hazare became the second Jayaprakash Narayan. But they've all failed. Corruption is growing because the church began to produce priests, not kings. The gospel is that the Lamb of God shed his blood to purchase slaves of Satan, to make them sons of God. Sonship is authority. Sonship is kingship. If your father is king, you are a prince, you are a princess, you're born to rule. What does that mean? We can take up in Q&A. But the reason Missionary Movement built Madras Christian College, Women's Christian College, was to train priests and kings. Theology got corrupted. Now we see our role as training priests and evangelists, not as training kings. Those who will make sure that God's will is being done on earth. So if you're looking at contemporary evangelical movement, whether it doesn't matter whether you're Pentecostal or Buxing or a Brethren or EU, UESI, this version of Christianity is not interested in training kings. So we run seminaries, we don't run universities, we don't run colleges. But modern India was created by a biblical movement which realized that slaves of Satan becoming sons of God is becoming priests and kings, serving our Father, making sure that his will is being done on earth. That's our role. So this book is not only explaining how modern India was created by the Bible, it is also sharing the future. If India is to become a great nation, there is no force in India that can make India a great nation except for the church. If there is lots of persecution happening in North India, the blame is on Tamil Nadu. You started a campaign against Aryan supremacy. Brahminical Congress. You overthrew the Congress government here. That movement is now sweeping whole of North India. And that's the conflict. 10, 15, 20% of the upper caste, will they rule India, or the slaves will be emancipated, empowered? So the Dravidian movement from Tamil Nadu, the tsunami that you started here in the 1950s, 60s, is now impacting whole of North India. Today, those 10, 15, 20% rulers are exhibiting how wicked they are, arresting innocent people, imprisoning innocent people, the police supporting guilty mobs, defending and protecting guilty mobs. But what God is doing is taking the movement that you started here to its logical end. And there is no way 10, 20% of Aryan supremacists can continue to dominate the lower castes, oppressed victims in India. India will change if we are willing to take up our cross and follow the Lord. So this morning, I preached a sermon here that Easter is an invitation for us to choose death. Jesus died and rose again so that we might be freed from the fear of death, which is the ultimate weapon that Satan has to keep us slaves. But if the faith, if the knowledge that Jesus has conquered not just sin, not just Satan, but he has conquered death, therefore we don't have to be afraid of death. When the church in North India, church in India, ceases to be afraid of death because death has been conquered, the church becomes the most powerful force against which the gates of hell shall not prevail. Now, unfortunately, the audio didn't work this morning, so the sermon, I never have notes, so I can't sit and rewrite what I've preached on Easter, but maybe they can rescue it. But that was the heart of the Easter sermon, that Jesus rose again, defeated death, to set us free from the fear of death, because the kingdom of Satan survives on the strength of the fear of death. That is Satan's ultimate weapon, which has been made useless, redundant on Good Easter Sunday, when the Son of God, who was crucified, rose again, and with power of the Spirit of holiness was declared to be the Son of God. And that's the transformation that has to come. What does it mean practically for the future of India? That's the 10th chapter of this book, and we will need a lot of your help in transforming India into a free and great nation, not a nation afraid by the terrorists who are governing us. Cross was a weapon of Rome to terrorize whole population into subjection. Jesus embraced the cross, took the weapon of the enemy to transform it into a weapon of love, mercy, compassion, forgiveness. That's the good news of Easter. And that is what has to happen in India. This is not part of the individualistic gospel that we've been hearing since the 1940s, that Jesus died to take our souls to heaven. That's true. But Jesus died for the nations. He died for the nation. And if you don't believe that, we will look into the scriptures. When Isaiah says, by his wounds we are healed. Who is the we? Isaiah was not an American individualist. He's talking about the nation that is sick. By his wounds we are healed. It's the nation, corrupt nation, that is healed by his wounds. That's the gospel. So let me stop there and give you time for discussion. This is provocative. This is raising many questions, but let's discuss them. Thank you.